Today's guest is Jason Coombs. We're really excited to have him on. He's a longtime friend. He is the founder and president of Brick House Recovery, a network of outpatient treatment centers that provide very personalized, holistic care for individuals and families struggling with substance abuse. He's also the best-selling author of a book called Unhooked. If you haven't read it, I'd highly recommend it to anyone. It gives practical evidence-based guidance on how to help someone that's going through addiction and recovery. He's got another long list of things that he's done and a master's in helping people and social work, and also is on the speaker circuit. He's now doing corporate events to help people with wellness. Again, longtime friend, longtime community leader. Welcome to the podcast today, Jason Coombs. Buddy.
Broski.
Man, it's good to see you. It's good to see you. I get emotional already, man. Thank you for all you do for our family and for everyone. You're a great person. You know that?
Thank you.
It's interesting. So Jason Coombs joins us today. I'll read a whole bio on you before, but it's going to be great to have you on today. But you've helped me so many times, so many different ways that it's pretty emotional when I see you walking in here today. Thank you. How you doing?
Well, and likewise, may I just point out?
Make sure you're talking to that.
May I just point out the countless times that I've reached out to you.
How long has it? It's been a long time. Has it been
that we've known each other?
It's got to be, yeah. We first
10
met
years, exactly.
10 years ago.
10 years in August.
Wow. I remember that first time you came in.
Yeah.
I was blown away then, and it's just kept going. You've done a lot of good for a lot of people, Jason. You're a very inspiring person to be around, and it's got to be an interesting way to live life.
I humbly accept and receive the kind words. It is wild. You experience the extremes. You experience the highs of witnessing miracles and witnessing people's lives totally pivot and families heal and come together and then go out and help other families, and that part is what drives the continued passion and the continued dedication. But we also do deal with obviously the hard
downs,
side,
right?
Yep.
Well, I mean, we've had you on. We've done podcasts for a few years, and you've been on before. And I love how our relationship just evolves. So I think the first time on, we'll just hit it briefly, but you had your own past of going through some addiction and some lows, and found yourself in some places you didn't ever think you'd be, and make yourself out. But flash forward to when I met you, you had just come to town 10 years ago with this dream and vision of helping other people and starting Brick House Recovery. Tell us about that journey and then your book. I mean, there's a lot of people I don't know have listened to you before on this, but I'd love to hear that. And then I've got some very specific things I want to chat with you about. But get us up to speed from like just Brick House and how things are going and what the latest is with you.
Absolutely. You mentioned, I'm a person in long-term recovery. I celebrated 15 years of continuous sobriety. That does include nights and weekends, and holidays, which is cool. And the idea of being a person in long-term recovery is beyond me, because there were days that I had conceded that I would die addicted to drugs and alcohol. And my entry point into that world came through an injury. And it's interesting because we think that somebody who blows out their knee in soccer in high school, like myself, gets hooked on Percocet that are prescribed to you, versus someone who goes through the exact same thing and doesn't get hooked on that medication. There is something that's fascinating about substance use disorder and the disease in the mind and in the brain, and it truly is an allergy. So the definition of an allergy is you have an abnormal reaction to whatever that is, whether it's peanuts that person breaks out in symptoms. The symptoms of someone with this disease, this allergy, is two-pronged. The first one is once you ingest it, it ignites something inside where you are driven to want more. It is a solution to a lot of the co-occurring disorders, whether it's ADHD, whether it's anxiety disorder or depression or bipolar. It kind of helps, shave off some of the rough edges of that. And then
I listened to a crazy podcast someone sent to me like a few weeks ago, and in it they specifically describe what you're describing now, which is what if you take two different people, like take me and you. You take this thing, and it solves. It does something for you immediately.
Yes.
Whether that's dopamine pathways, whether that's whatever it is, it does something that you're like, oh, that was different, and that helps me. Versus someone like me, which is exactly the opposite. It's like I feel horrible, right?
Yep.
And that distinguishing thing drives behaviors. And I don't think people realize that have not experienced. But I'm getting to the point now as I get older. I think every sphere, almost every family, almost every people know people that have struggled with addiction. So I think it's becoming easier to talk about. I think, don't you think?
I do.
I think it used to be like taboo of, oh, you had this or you don't have that. But the more experience I get in my life, I think almost everyone's sphere of influence in their circle, their family has had addictions. And I think that people are becoming more aware of, hey, I'm lucky
Right.
that I had the aversion and didn't have the other reaction. I love your allergy analogy because it's like that's what it is, right?
That's right.
And so you have knee surgery, you have this thing, and then it's like, oh, wow.
Yeah. The symptoms flare up, and you ignites the phenomenon of craving. And then the other prong to it, which is often really misunderstood, is someone with peanut allergy doesn't stash peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in the garage and goes out in the middle of the night to consume them without their spouse knowing about it. And that's the other piece, is there's this insanity of the mind, or the phenomenon of this, the idea where all consequences go out the window and you get this tunnel vision and you just are driven by the midbrain, and it overrides all the prefrontal cortex stuff. And so how do you reverse that? Well, that's where recovery comes in. That's where support systems come in, and they literally act as your prefrontal cortex and say, hey, that's not the best idea to go get engaged with someone that's 2 weeks sober, or jump into a roommate situation where someone's toxic. It's kind of like, hey, let's rally around each other and help. And so I went through that myself, and it's been quite a journey through the process.
Talk about the kind of plasticity of the brain and the addiction part, where you're wiring things that drive addiction, and then what it takes. It takes real effort to say, hey, we're going to rework this and rewire, if you will, the way you think about situations and people to try to help you get out of addiction, right? I mean, it's work. It's your life's duty, right? That's what you're doing for all these people, but it's hard too, right?
Yeah.
Because it involves so many different things to get people clear and free of past relationships that may be toxic, and get them into a situation where they're able to rewire and change the way that they think and the way that their brain works, right? And then they experience sobriety. And talk us through that a little bit of how witnessing that over and over goes for you.
Yeah, you brought up the neuroplasticity. You brought up behaviors and actions. And I think to really simplify it and also take a broad stroke that applies to business, applies to anyone's personal habits in their lives, there's an entry point. And I take this from the book Atomic Habits from James Clear, and we really try to help our clients at Brick House identify what the entry points are to these lifelong habits. And so an entry point, he gives this analogy of a dance choreographer named Twyla Tharp, who in her 80s is still dancing every single day. And she speaks to the habit is not going to the studio and dancing. The habit is putting on her dance clothing and hailing the cab at the curb. And once she completes that, the cab and the getting dressed for dancing, then she has accomplished the habit. And then the rest kind of takes care of itself. And so identifying entry points to recovery and getting into these rhythms, that's what will change the brain is through action. And I think people think it's so hard, but when you look at it in context of where the person's at, if they're willing
Yeah.
and they're not pushing up against it and don't want to change, like if they want to change, it's more of like a flow and a surrender and a willingness to just allow the healing process to take place, and all the distractions that come in and pepper you, those are really where the hard work is saying no to this, saying no to that, saying no to them, and just being a part of the healing process.
Is part of that, well, a couple back, just while you were talking here. So you've been a dear friend, you've helped my family, you've helped my friends, you've been a great acquaintance, but we had you come to our retreat. Was it last year? Mm-hmm. Last year we had our company retreat in McCall, and we had you come up and do 2 days of sessions, and the whole focus of the 2-day retreat was just wellness. Just personal wellness, just taking care of yourself. It was phenomenal, Jason. It was wonderful. I just sat taking notes the whole time. And then I had read Atomic Habits before, but I reread it after you came. And this idea of systems or flow or whatever you talk about, like, let's talk a little bit more about that, because I think all too often this idea of a list of things I'm going to do, these, and it leads to failures because, well, I haven't done that. And the concept with the Atomic Habits is, no, create a system of success. For her, it was hailing the cab. It was getting dressed. And that was the thing that then, for me, it's where my alarm goes off in the morning. It's my morning routine. It's trying to do that as often as I can. I'm not perfect, but I've got systems in place to make myself more successful than not. But one of the questions I was going to ask you, long backstory here, but talk about what that feels like for people, whether you're recovering from an addiction or you're just trying to be successful and change your habits in life as a business person that a lot of people are listening to today. It feels good too. It can become its own addiction to have success with these systemic changes where you go, oh, I'm being successful. Like I look at my week and I just got up 4 days early and worked out and drank my athletic greens and did my vitamins and did my cold plunge or whatever. I mean, do you find that with people that success also gets you going? You use the word flow. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I would say the flow is couched in the principle of progress, not perfection. And that comes from recovery literature as well as one of my favorite business books. And this idea of developing routines, but giving yourself a little bit of room so that you don't get so rigid, because there's a negative side to that, is the day that you miss,
Yeah.
or the trip. When you're traveling, you can really get into that negative self-talk, and the negative self-talk breeds on itself, and ultimately creates the energy that is opposite of flow. It creates anxiety, and it creates the other symptomology of depression and so forth. So, as you talked about the retreat, we really scuba dived into mental wealth as opposed to only focusing on mental health, but looking at, okay, how do we optimize our mental stamina? How do we optimize our mental excellence when we arrive at work? And so there's these systems and processes from a organizational standpoint, and being a business owner myself, boy, I have gone through all those stages of infancy with zero systems and zero processes to adolescence, where we're literally slobbering our way through trying to create these habits and these systems and processes, and then you have a staff change, and then that all goes out the window, and then you got to restart it, and then you get to young adulthood or maturity as an organization, and the more refined those guardrails are, or those automatics, that brings a sense of security to employees and to the participants that are really trying to deliver in an organization. And then you take it down to the personal level and those daily habits or system and processes. I have been really immersing into Miracle Morning. And that is by Hal Elrod. And check it out on Prime. It's a documentary that goes through the lifesavers. And not to really dive into his content, but the idea is that those savers are an acronym of actions that set up your morning to have a successful day. And if you can master the morning with routines and really open up this channel of peace, of inspiration, of personal revelation that will guide you throughout the day, it's interesting how much fear drives us if we don't do that. And we're driven by anxieties. And I think to a point, that's why some business people are successful and why ambition is honored, is the anxiety is literally the fuel to take action and to get things done, because you feel a sense of dopamine release and serotonin and the whole thing. Yeah. And I think that's a good thing. And so, but there's a Goldilocks zone there where you're not too far on one end where you're driven by anxiety and fear, because that ripples out to your family, and that ripples out to your spouse, and that ripples out to your employees. And then on the other end, where it's just so lax, without systems, without guardrails, and finding that Goldilocks zone, I think, is really important. And it all starts with mastering the morning, which means mastering the setup at bedtime.
I love that. I mean, that's part of what you taught at our retreat,
right?
Is how do you optimize? How do you maximize? How do you take where you are and continue growing and learning and becoming better and changing the motives? Yeah. I'm going to shift a little bit here. There's been, we're going through a little bit of a rebrand here right now. In fact, the podcast now, when it goes out, is ever Onward.
I love it.
And this thing's kind of, I want to talk to you a little bit about this, because I know it might be a little personal, but we all kind of get things figured out and go, and then we get smacked down, right? And things change, or it's always changing. There's always problems coming. And I think there's never that point in your life where you're not going to have challenges and problems. Personal, family, kids, business, you're always going to have the next challenge. So this concept, I was talking to my son-in-law, Matthew, about this, and we were talking about, okay, what's our tagline? And it's ever onward. It's like, hey, it's going to change, and we're going forward. And we're going to go forward with enthusiasm and grit, and we're going to go forward in a very optimistic and we're going to go get this done way. How important is that resilience? I think the word is resilience, right? That makes up our lives. And I know you just went through, I remember the day you called me, or I called you with your wife, and I just got a report that her scans are negative. But that idea, Jason, and I'm going to probably get emotional here, but this, hey, we're clipping along, and then we got to figure this out.
Yeah. My wife was diagnosed with stage 3C ovarian cancer 15 months ago. And at this point in time, we were, as you said, clipping along as a family, as a business. We just expanded into our third location in Coeur d'Alene. And
how old were your twins at the time?
7. 7 years old, a boy and a girl. And when we experience that blow, you do have the choice of how to respond. And I think what's interesting is, how I brought up a little earlier about this channel of access to inspiration and access to my higher powers, guidance and direction, which I really see him as my CEO of my life. And try to take as much direction as I can, which requires this seeking. Well, you back up to February of 2023. She was diagnosed in April, where they found a softball-sized tumor in her ovaries and found another golf ball-sized tumor between her diaphragm and her liver. And in February, I had this inspired thought where I just felt like I was in a rut. You know those seasons where you're just like struggling to get out of bed because there's nothing that you feel that's driving you. I mean, maybe the listeners can or can't relate to this, but maybe one of your loved ones is experienced that, and you just want to motivate them, like, come on, there's something to live for. Well, when you feel like you're in that rut, you start to seek, like, okay, what should I do? And do I need a diet? Do I need ice bath? Do I need this and that? And I had a friend introduce me to deliberate cold exposure, and this was something that I had been seeing on social media, how it's helping people lose weight, or it's helping people kind of face some of their fears. And my buddy started to talk about it completely differently, and he is a manager of a large pharmacy here in the area, and he was struggling so much with anxiety that he was debilitated, where it was difficult to even go to work. And he's never had this issue before, and here he is in his mid-40s, and all of a sudden, he's facing some hardcore anxiety, like debilitating anxiety. And he told me that he began, for the last 5 weeks, he began doing deliberate cold exposure, and this was in the winter. And his wife was sitting next to him, and she said, I can't even believe the change I've seen in him. And I was just piqued my interest. I was like, really? Because I have anxiety. I've always dealt with anxiety. It's one of the reasons why I started using drugs and alcohol. And when he was telling me about the benefits of the mental side, not just the fact that it converts white fat to brown fat and it helps you on the autoimmune side of things and optimizes your physical health, but the mental piece was so interesting. He said, you know why I do it? He said, you notice that before you even get close to the ice bath, your voice, your negative self-talk starts to talk to you and tell you, you can't do this. Don't do it. This is dumb, or there's no benefit. And then when you push through that and you get to the loud voice, when you step in it and you sit in it, and you and I have done this together, when you step in that ice bath, it is screaming at you. That voice is like, get out. Your body can't take this. Your heart's pumping, you're breathing, and you're gasping for air because you're just not used to it. And then the body starts to adapt. And if you can stay in it long enough for those 10, 20, 30 seconds, whatever it is, to get over that first wall, you just accomplished some serious mental and emotional resilience. And we talk about resilience. So I began this habit in February based on inspiration. When she was diagnosed in April, I had already been working on this resilience piece. So it was a preparatory action that helped me optimize so that when we found out, it didn't totally debilitate me or lead me back to drinking or using or to totally crumble, but to actually take it as, okay, this is the ice bath. Breathe. Yep. Take some breaths. We're going to get through this wall. Be there for my kids. Be there for her. It's not so much survival. It's more like, how can I help them? How can I help them? And that was everything. And you wouldn't believe the doors that opened up. People that rallied around us to help us, from housing down in Salt Lake at Huntsman Cancer Institute, which you led us to. And you guided us. You were our first call, and I'm so grateful for your willingness to help. And for the listeners, it's it's a really personal podcast because Tommy and I help each other with our family members' stuff all the time, which we won't get into for privacy of our loved ones, but it's, you know what I'm talking about. I know what you're talking about, and it's just so beautiful.
It's pretty beautiful and intimate. I will tell you, going back to that experience, listen, you are one of the brightest minds in just your gift to share with others and make them better, right? I mean, that's the way you live your life, and always have since I first met you, is I'm here to serve other people. It's just so noble. And to watch you then be in that position of vulnerability and watch how you navigated it on behalf of your wife and your kids, and how you just, the ever onward. Okay, what are we going to do next? It was awesome, Jason, to just witness and watch. And what a great example it was. And I'm sure you had your moments very often of, okay, this is hard, but how strong you were for her and for your kids was amazing. And so she's doing well.
Yeah.
Can
I speak to that?
Yeah.
She is doing well. Her scans just came back clean, and she is completing her first stage of chemo in September, and then we won't have to travel every 3 weeks to Huntsman and Salt Lake. From Boise, we'll be able to go every 3 months.
Awesome.
And ever onward. But I want to speak to, I think, another divine intersection in our relationship, which is very cool. And I hope it's worthy of telling for the listeners, because this is kind of fun. It's like you and I reminiscing, but connecting dots nonetheless. And when you called me, and in the middle of the summer, I was in another rut. This was last summer, and I'm down at Salt Lake, out of my comfort zone. I am full-time dad, full-time business owner, and full-time caregiver of my wife, going through chemo, where she's in bed most of the time. And we're out of our area. We're down in a house, and we don't know the neighbors. So, it's a tall order to execute at a high level, especially when I deal with some of the mental stuff and emotional stuff that I have. Anyway, and you reached out and you said, hey, I'm looking for someone to come and present at our retreat in September. Would you be interested? Or do you know anyone who might be interested? And I so badly wanted to decline and send you to someone else who I knew would rise up and knock it out of the park, because I knew at that moment I had nothing to give. I felt like I had nothing to give because I had no routine. I was struggling with sleeping. I was really struggling with my diet, nutrition. I was off balance in every way, just trying to do what I could to survive. I was away from my ice bath, which I wish I would have had it, but it was too hot. And, when I said yes to your offer, that's what propelled me to get into action. And that's when I started to search. And then Miracle Morning came into my life, and then I began to optimize my mornings. And that was a pivot point for me to get out of the funk and to get out of the rut, because I knew I had to come and deliver for you and your company. And I wasn't going to let you down. I was like, okay, I'm going to do whatever I got to do to overcome this freaking mountain that I have in front of me and try to be the best version of myself. And I felt like the entire event, you knocked it out of the park with the whole lineup. And I don't know how you feel about it, but I felt so good about
amazing. I do want to, we have a lot of people. I hear from people that listen to the podcast, and they're always like, hey, thank you, because it's become part of my routine or whatever. But I do want to get to, if you've got folks out there, what's some advice that you gave us up there? We've talked about the Miracle Morning. We've talked about atomic habits, optimizing yourself. Talk about just interactions and leadership and self-improvement and some things, because I do think we all get in ruts. I do. I think, like all of us, there's a routine that we get into. There's times of being overwhelmed. There's times when we're like, we need some wins, right? I mean, have you ever had those weeks where you're like, okay, it's Thursday and we've had no wins this week, right? And so I know you have so much to offer and give, but give some advice to folks out there that are either business owners, running businesses, running families, trying to figure out life. And when you get in a rut, what advice would you give us? Some of the stuff you told us at the retreat.
Yeah, there are so many bullet points that are just skipping through my head at this question. And I will default to the number one being, who do I surround myself with, and can I reach out to those people? I call them my personal board of directors over my life. And those people are usually, I can count on one hand. You're one of them that I will reach out to when I am facing something, and I will ask for your guidance and your help. It's usually the big things. I know you're busy, and not that you're busy, I just don't want to pepper you with the small things. But the big things, who are the people in my life that I can turn to and ask for help? Because I think that's the biggest thing.
I love this because it's mentorship, right? I mean, we all, no matter where you are in your station in life, having mentors, people like that handful of people that you can trust and go to and be vulnerable. Like, I think vulnerability and just being authentically raw and saying, hey, Jason, man, I'm struggling, or I've got this problem, or I'm not feeling this, or I'm in a rut, or whatever. Those people that know you well, that can look you in the eye and say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Or you got a blind spot here. There's just great things that come from mentorship. So I love that you brought that up first.
Yeah. I believe that I am the average of the people I spend time with, and the average of the people that I surround myself with in terms of how to solve problems, in terms of how to access help beyond just people. Like, how do I channel some of that inspiration from my higher power and include that in business and include that in my personal life, which is so important to me. It's literally guided me through the hardest of days. And of course, over the last 15 months, it's literally been my guiding light. I would say maybe the second point would be to focus on optimizing our mindset. Now, there are a lot of things out there that we can turn to that will help us, listen to people that are mindset masters and getting our mindset in an abundance stage of thinking. What I mean by mindset, it is really coming down to the very thoughts that we have as we talk to ourselves. And one of my mentors, Dave Blanchard, who's the CEO of the Augmendino Group, he asked me one time when we were in Coronado Island speaking at an event, he said, Jason, if I talk to you the way you talk to yourself, would we be friends? And the reality is, no, I'd probably punch him in the nose. Because the things I say to myself, if I look at myself in the mirror, I'm usually not affirming anything positive. And so one piece of advice that I offer to anyone in business, any one of my employees, which I have between 30 to 40 employees on any given day, they are encouraged to follow a simple little practice, which can be as expensive as one Post-it note. And I wrote the words, give yourself a compliment today. And I'll look at myself in the eyes, in the mirror, as an entry point to a day of self-love. And I will say to myself in my own eyes, which is in the beginning it's a little awkward, but once you get used to it, and I will affirm that I am a good husband, I am a good father, I am a faithful husband. And I will tell myself these things that I can believe, that I'm really striving to become. And what's interesting is I've noticed that negative self-talk has diminished just by that one 30-second practice in the mirror.
You know what I've done since the retreat? Because I've always had routines and I'm pretty good at them, but this idea of mindset, after the retreat, I took a 3x5 card. It's fluorescent yellow, and I wrote mindset on it, and I wrote 3 very personal things to me, and I stuck it first place I go in the morning when I say my prayers on my computer screen. I put it there. It's still there today, and call them affirmations, call them whatever you want to call them, but it's made a huge difference for me because I think it level sets you, right? It puts you where you need to be in your space. I think that's a powerful concept you taught, which was this idea of self-optimization, that if you can be your best self, and I like the morning thing too, right? The way our bodies work and the way we've got these, clocks that work in us, and we sleep and we wake up, it does give you a chance every day of renewal to go see the sunshine and say, okay, here's my day, right? And just starting that right in the right mindset and dragging that with you,
Yeah.
it becomes infectious. As you see family, then you see workers, you go throughout your day. It's powerful. And that was one of the things you really drilled into us there was mindset, Miracle Morning. I've read all the books. I think you recommended 7 books at our retreat, but I love that idea. So mentorship, and then it's this mindset and self-affirmations wherever you are. And there are people probably listening today thinking, I don't need any self-affirmations. I don't need that. But if we're all honest, wherever we are and we want to go to that next level, it's a powerful tool.
Oh, yeah. You think about just doing the math, where if you say 3 affirmations yourself in the mirror each day, in 1 year, that's an aggregate of 1,095 affirmations. How do you not change your mindset with those numbers?
Yeah.
So it's just those little micro tweaks to the morning. And I would say the third suggestion is, in context of mastering the morning, something so dang simple is drink 2 full glasses of water in the morning, because the first glass of water is going to be consumed by the brain, because the brain has to be hydrated to optimize itself, and the second goes to the body. And I learned that when I was cycling, and my mentor in cycling, as I was training for an Ironman, he said, you have to start each morning with your minerals and electrolytes and your water. And what I found is the days that I don't drink water, it's like I'm driving on fumes mentally.
Yeah.
It's just a different thing. But when it's lubed up and it's fueled with hydration, it's amazing how that makes you feel. These are just some small little tweaks, like stretching your body in the morning.
Yeah.
Stretching for 5 minutes,
You go back to like this wake up, sunlight, stretching, water, affirmations, some sort of thing to get you spiritually right, get you ready to go out for the day, and compare those days to when you don't have those days. It's powerful. And, it's the whole idea of, we become what we want to be by continuously being what we want to become. I mean, it's these daily things. And what I love about what you taught us too is you're going to have days where you miss, but you get a reset every day, right? And it's this directional mindset of saying, I'm going to, I got 3 out of 7 this week, and next week I'm going to be better, and kind of not beating yourself up too. For a lot of people that are in business world, I think they are perfectionists, and they get too tied up to, I missed this, or I didn't do that, or I need to do more. And we also need to be a little bit kind to ourselves, right? There's a lot of pulls in life right now, and you try to be all things to everybody, and you're going to fall short.
Yeah, I'm actually pulling up a quote about something that you shared with me, and it might take me a minute, so you might need to edit this, Matthew.
No editing, right, Matthew?
No editing. But as I pull up, let me just pull this
Are you
up.
awake over there?
I think it'll be worth it because you turned me onto this. From the book, The Art of War.
Yeah.
So Sorry, I had to go to my, you caught me mid.
You're good. You're good. Well, while you're looking that up, I think that the meat of what I wanted to get to today is a little bit, just a taste of what you did. And I know you're doing more of these corporate events, but it was wonderful. It was just absolutely wonderful for what you did. I want to make sure I get to a couple of other things. So we've kind of talked about being the best you can be, optimizing yourself. I really want to get that today, but I also want to give you some time to talk about what services you provide, because very personal. Again, you've kind of brought it up a couple times, but the number of times I've called you and said, hey, Jason, either my family member or my friend needs help, and the amount of time that you go through to get them placed and helped has been incredible. Talk a little bit about your core business, your locations, what you do, what you provide. I think there's always an opportunity to get that information out there, because it is a tremendous resource, and it's the best I've ever seen or been around. So talk a little bit about it.
Oh, thank you. Brick House Recovery is a adult-only outpatient substance use disorder and mental health treatment center, and our focus is on those who are interested in healing and recovering through a spiritual pathway. This isn't church camp. This isn't religious. It's just making sure that we don't dismiss the recovery of the soul, so the mind, body, and the spirit, because substance use disorder, anxiety disorder, depression, and down the list, they do impact every part of us. And when we come into treatment being so addicted and struggling, we're experiencing a very real spiritual anorexia. And so we focus on a faith-based approach, which is an open door for those that struggle or wrestle with principles of faith or principles of the spirit.
And said differently, like I'm not going to say who this was, but I'll just say a very dear friend who you helped. I will never forget, never, the first time I was able to see him after he got him placed and we went in, and he said to me, I have been trying to figure this out. I mean, I've exhausted myself trying to figure this out. And the second I learned that there's got to be something more to help me, it was powerful for him. And this idea that, hey, you don't have to do it yourself. You can rely on, and that means different things for everybody, right. A higher power. The fact that there's something bigger than us out there that is willing to help or we can rely on, it was completely life-changing for him. And he sat there with tears in his eyes, and he's like, I think I can do this now. And, it was hard, sure, but he's had no relapses. It's been this amazing thing, and I just still thank you so much, because, I see where he was and how worried I was about him and how did he ever get through this. And then he goes through the program with you, and at the other end, he has this beautiful life, and he's figured it out. But it was coping skills. It's everything you taught him it was unbelievably life transforming for him, for his loved ones. And so anyway.
Man, my team is the best of the best. They truly could work anywhere in Idaho and kill it, and they choose to come to Brick House. And I'm so grateful that their work is impacting your loved ones and others. Yeah. And we get to see the sunlight of the Spirit really feed that side while treating the psych, while treating the medication, while treating the emotional and the cognitive pieces to recovery, which is a tall order in and of itself. But what we found is that when we create an environment where people who struggle with meaning and purpose and faith in a plan of this life here, what we find is that they come in and they're able to go through that wrestle in a non-judgmental space. Yeah. And people that are like, yeah, get it. We get it, and they literally unpack all their beliefs and all their hang-ups and resentments, because some have experienced religious trauma too and have been abused in the name of that. And so the idea of like putting it all out on the table, looking at it, working with our staff while analyzing, and then repacking it in a way that's going to serve them going forward and leave the rest. That's a very important process so that they can begin to, and I've done this with my own recovery, begin to link arms with a power that's going to be my best friend rather than an archetype of my dad, for example, who was disappointed in me, didn't want to talk to me, was angry because I had burned him, and rightfully so. But to view a higher power in the same light, I needed to recorrect some of how I viewed that. So being a faith-based program is our first differential advantage. The second is that we are industry trusted, and I think that this is more and more important these days, where there's snakes in the grass in our industry. And as healthcare compliance and standards within the entire system, nationally and here locally, we are required to meet certain standards from the CARF or Joint Commission. And what's interesting is that for some reason, behavioral health providers have given our industry a black eye because they will prey on those that are addicted and sick. And that has been an issue throughout our country for quite a while. And so when I say that we're industry trusted, I sit on the Idaho Association of Addiction Professionals board. And my hope is to rally and gather and influence the industry as a whole here in Idaho, so that we are highlighting the good players that are doing things right, that are honest and ethical, and kind of like calling out those that aren't. And that process is underway, and I think that because we're engaged in that, we get some of the accolades from Idaho's Best in mental wellness 3 years in a row, and Best Places to Work, top 10, and just a lot of those kinds of accolades we did earn. And I like to praise my staff with these awards, not so much myself at all, but we won a national award for excellence in treatment, and we were one of 6 treatment centers that were awarded. And the others have many, many, many locations throughout the country. I mean, we're a little boutique shop here in Idaho, and they base it on outcomes. So real data, real outcomes, and it's just really cool to see how that works.
Where is the best place for people to get information?
BrickHouseRecovery.com.
BrickHouseRecovery.com. There's a location here in Meridian. You opened Coeur d'Alene.
We pivoted over to Boise.
You did?
We're in a little bit bigger space over in Boise, and Coeur d'Alene and Idaho Falls.
Idaho Falls. Well, that hour went way, way, way too fast. We got to just have you come back another time. Last word here for you is, if you had one lesson you've learned through all of this, what would that be? What's your parting words for our audience today?
Pause. Would it be better to serve it as a business parting, or
whatever, personal
parting?
business, family, whatever?
Goodness, you give me no prep. Usually I can speak on the spot with this kind of stuff, and
well, the problem with you is it's too hard to distill it down to one thing. But what's one thing you'd leave with them?
You know, the parting word or message that I would leave with the audience listening today, and I hope it's an evergreen message that would live on, is that as we normalize the conversation about mental health challenges and normalize the conversation around those that struggle with substance use disorder, that we can really begin to offer support in a non-judgmental and an open dialogue across the board. And it's interesting how much we're up against. And all you have to do is go sit in one of the legislative sessions about mandatory minimums and to see the stigma and to hear the labels that those that are making decisions view and call those that have these struggles. We are far, far away from where we need to be in viewing these as illnesses and viewing the symptoms as symptoms of an illness rather than moral issues or the labels that are thrown out. And I have really struggled with my emotions when I go to those sessions because I want to stand up and call them all out, and that's not really good either. But my parting message is to let's contribute to the positive side of this, normalize it to a degree, and begin to praise those that are doing the good work, that are willing to see this as a disease from the legislative level, and willing to see the opportunities where there is room for help. We do need more resources. We do need more funding. We do need doors that will open instead of only relying on the state Medicaid budget. You know, we need to call out those organizations that have money for causes that they want to get behind it, and this is one that is desperate in need of causes and funding.
Amen. That was awesome. Thank you, Jason.
You're welcome.
Love
Thank you for having
Thanks
me.
for being a dear friend and for coming on again and for just the tremendous amount of good you do every day in your life. Just an honor to know you and be around you, buddy. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.